I figured I might as well. I saw this report and it seemed very interesting. There isn't a lot that I can speak to about it, just because I am not a scientific, expert. But it is interesting. No evidence that depression is caused by low serotonin levels finds comprehensive review. After decades of study, there remains no clear evidence that serotonin levels or serotonin activity are responsible for depression, according to a major review of prior research led by UCL students. Now, a couple of things that were interesting. First of all, I did not know that there had previously not been any evidence that actually pointed to serotonin being kind of a contributing factor to depression. I'd assumed that it was sort of, because I do know that, like, using serotonin as a mood booster for people who have depression is something that is done. I just assumed that there was some sort of, scientific basis for that, but I guess there wasn't. But I find this interesting. The New Umbrella Review, in an overview of existing meta-analysis and systematic reviews. Oh, that's interesting. So basically, they just did like a retroactive study on a bunch of studies that were done about this topic. That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. So just that depression is not likely caused by chemical imbalance, and calls into question what antidepressants do. Most antidepressants are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. I didn't know that. Which were originally said to work by correcting abnormally low serotonin levels. Well, that's interesting, because I've been kind of thinking, because I did hear about the headline, but I wanted to wait until the stream to go over this with you all. But I did know that some depression medications, were serotonin based, but I didn't know that most of them were, and that's interesting. Which originally said to correct, let's see. There is no other accepted pharmacological mechanism by which antidepressants affect the symptoms of depression. That is fascinating. But the thing is, like, aren't there some antidepressants that are, like, known to be effective? Like, I would hope so. So then if serotonin doesn't affect it, but they're all based on serotonin, and yet some of them are effective, that there's got to be something else to that. It's got to be more than just that in my head. Let's see. It is always difficult to prove a negative. This is the words from lead author Professor Joanna Moncrieff. It is always difficult to prove a negative, but I think that we can safely say that after a vast amount of research conducted over several decades, there is no convincing evidence that depression is caused by serotonin abnormalities, particularly by lower levels or reduced activity of serotonin. The popularity of the chemical imbalance theory of depression has coincided with a huge increase in the use of antidepressants. Prescriptions for antidepressants have risen dramatically since the 1990s, with 1 in 6 adults in England and 2% of teenagers now being prescribed antidepressant in a given year. Many people take antidepressants because they have been led to believe their depression is a biochemical cause, but in this new research suggests this belief is not grounded in evidence. That's huge news right there. Because one thing that's huge about this news is that, where does the scientific community go from here? Okay, here it is. Here's another interesting part of the article. While the study did not review the efficacy of antidepressants, the authors encourage further research and advice into treatments that might focus instead on managing stressful or traumatic events in people's lives, such as psychotherapy, along with other practices such as exercise or mindfulness, or addressing underlying contributors such as poverty, stress, and loneliness. That all sounds good to me. Although the thing about poverty is, like what do they say? Hey, you're depressed, make money. Like how are they gonna address the poverty side of it? Like how, like what are they actually gonna do? That part I'm kind of curious about. But anyways, that is interesting. And I sort of I feel like this actually would be a good tie-in to the Andrew Tate drama that I want to cover, because this actually touches on one of the subjects that he's spoken to. But yeah, I mean this kind of makes sense, sort of, I guess. It is interesting, I don't know all the underlying science, but the tough thing about it is, if what if, a lot of the causes for depression are situational and you can't change those situations. So for example, like this article says, like, oh, why don't you address the poverty aspect of it? Well, maybe it is possible that, the poverty isn't something that you can just like go to somebody and be like, hey, stop being poor. I think that it shouldn't I shouldn't need to say this, but if you want to stop somebody from being poor, the way to do it is usually not by going up to them and telling them to stop being poor. This is usually not how it works.